One of the things that can be quite tricky in people photographs is getting good skin tone. Yet skin tone is incredibly important. Therefore, what I want to do is spend a few movies on talking about how we can get really good skin tone. And here initially, all that I want to do is just highlight a couple of resources for you and also walk you through the process conceptually. Now, once I've introduced the concept of color correcting skin, then what we're going to do is apply our knowledge to a couple of different photographs. Well, let's start off here by focusing in on this little handout file that I've created. It's called Skin Tone PSD. Here I'll press F a couple of times in order to really focus in on this document. Well, one of the things you may want to do later is refer back to this file because here you can see we have all of these different steps of how exactly we're going to walk through this process. Yet initially, I don't want to walk through all the steps. Rather, I want to break this down into three main conceptual steps. The first thing we want to do is sample an area of skin. Next step, we want to look at the CMYK values of that sample point. And if we notice any problems of those values, we're going to then make corrections with our curves adjustment layer. So again, conceptually, we're going to take three steps. We'll set a point, we'll look at the CMYK values, and then we'll make some corrections. And we're going to make corrections so that our CMYK values have a nice mix. And you're going to think of this mix a little bit as a guide, as a recipe. It's not always going to be one-to-one perfect, but it will get us going in a really good direction. Well, what exactly are these CMYK numbers and what's all of this about? Well, one of the things that's interesting about these CMYK numbers is that for most skin tones, what we can do is have equal amounts of magenta and yellow, yet having a little bit more yellow than magenta. Now for our cyan, what we want is 1/3 to 1/5 of the magenta or the yellow. So we have a little more variance here with our cyan. So in regards to numbers, what could be some potential sample numbers? Well, let's take a look at these. We'll say, for example, magenta and yellow. Yellow is a little bit higher than magenta. Perfect. Those would be great numbers. Well, then if we were going to evaluate our cyan amount, what would be some good amounts? The easiest way to determine your cyan amount is to multiply these numbers by 3 or by 5. For example, 3 by 10 is 30. Okay, well that's acceptable. Or 5 by 6 is 30. Okay, well that's acceptable. So our cyan amount, in order to be 1/3 to 1/5 of magenta or yellow, would need to be between 6 and 10. Now I know what some of you are thinking, oh my gosh, we have to do math, and oh my gosh, this concept is absolutely crazy. Well, it's not that bad. Keep in mind that what I'm trying to do here is break this down, distill it, and introduce it just a little bit here before we actually begin to work with these numbers. And what you're going to see in the subsequent movies is how we can apply this concept in a number of different scenarios. And simply by being introduced to the concept and then by watching this on a couple of different images and then practicing on your own photographs, you'll soon discover how you can get really good skin tone color correction on your people photographs.